The handshake never happened, and that moment changed everything. It was 2:47 p.m. on a cold Thursday afternoon in March 1991. Dale Morrison stood inside the main office of a John Deere dealership in Cedar Rapids. He had stood in that building dozens of times over the last 20 years. He had bought tractors there, signed papers there, shaken hands there. This time was different. Dale extended his hand across the polished wooden desk. His palm was rough, cracked from decades of cold mornings, grease, soil, and steel. The kind of hand that built things instead of pointing at them. Rick Pohl's son did not take it. Rick was the general manager. Clean shirt, perfect hair, soft hands. He leaned back in his leather chair and stared at Dale's hand like it didn't belong in the room. "Mr. Morrison," Rick said calmly, "I don't think you understand your situation." Dale's hand stayed in the air for a moment, then slowly lowered, not in anger, not in shame, just lowered. Rick continued, "You're 3 payments behind on your $49.60. That's $11,000. The bank has already contacted us about repossession, and now you're here asking for more credit." Dale stood quietly, 62 years old, 6'3", 40 years on the same land. "I need a hydraulic pump," Dale said. "The one on my 4,430 failed. I've got 200 acres of corn to plant. The window is closing." Rick smiled, thin, practiced. "Then you should have maintained your equipment properly." Dale's jaw tightened. "I maintain my equipment just fine. Parts fail. That's why dealers exist. To support farmers." Rick leaned forward slightly. "Customers pay their bills. Right now, Mr. Morrison, you're a liability, not a customer." The words landed heavy. Outside the office window, brand new tractors sat under bright lights. Perfect paint, perfect lines, price tags that made Dale's stomach turn. "I bought 4 tractors from this dealership," Dale said, "over 20 years. Never missed a payment until the drought last year." Rick shrugged. "That's unfortunate. But Henderson John Deere isn't charity. We're a business. I'm asking for $300 in parts on credit." Dale said, "I'll pay when I sell my crop in November." "November is 8 months away," Rick replied. "What guarantee do I have you'll even have a crop?" Dale stood up. "So that's it," he said quietly. 20 years means nothing." Rick stood too. This time, Rick extended his own hand. "Times change," Rick said. "The successful operations are getting bigger, more efficient. Small family farms like yours are becoming obsolete." Dale looked at the hand. Clean, careless, offered only after the damage was done. He turned and walked out. The handshake that never happened would cost Rick Pohl's son everything. Dale sat in his truck in the parking lot for 10 minutes, hands on the steering wheel, not moving. His phone rang. "Hello, Dale." A voice said, "This is Martin Chun." Martin worked at Deere Corporate, an engineer. They had met years earlier at a farm show. "Martin?" Dale said, "Now's not a good time." "I'll be quick," Martin said. "I'm in Cedar Rapids for meetings. I wanted to buy you lunch. Pick your brain about the hydraulic system on the 4430. Dale almost laughed. "Your dealer just told me I'm not worth doing business with." There was silence. "What dealer?" Martin asked. "Henderson." Dale said, "Rick Pohl's son." Another pause. "Can I still buy you lunch?" Martin asked. "Not about equipment, just to talk." Dale looked out at the dealership sign, at the place he had trusted for 2 decades. 1 hour, Dale said. That's it. He didn't know it yet, but that lunch would change the course of his farm, his future, and an entire dealership. The refused handshake was only the beginning. They met at a small diner off Highway 30, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and coffee that never tasted fresh. Martin arrived first. Then another man followed him inside, older, gray hair, wearing a suit that looked expensive but worn, like it had seen real miles. Dale Morrison. Martin said, "This is James Whitmore." James extended his hand. Dale shook it. The grip was firm, not polite, not soft, a farmer's handshake. Regional director, James said, I oversee all John Deere dealerships in Iowa and Nebraska. They sat down. Coffee arrived. Steam rose between them. Tell me what happened, James said. So Dale did. He told them about the missed payments, about the drought, about the failed hydraulic pump, about asking for $300 in parts, and about the handshake Rick, Pohl's son, refused to take. James listened without interrupting, did not defend, did not explain, just listened. When Dale finished, James closed his notebook. And he told you small farms are obsolete. James said, yes. James nodded slowly. That's interesting, he said, because our internal data says the exact opposite. Martin leaned forward. Dale flagged a hydraulic defect 3 years ago, Martin said. He explained exactly why it would fail. We tested it. He was right. James looked up sharply. There's a known defect? Yes, Martin said. We issued a quiet service bulletin. No recall. James exhaled slowly. So let me understand this, he said. We have a customer hit by the worst drought in 40 years. A known design defect. A farmer asking for $300 in credit to stay operational. And our dealer refused him. That's correct, Dale said. James picked up his phone. I need to make a call. He dialed. Todd Henderson. James said when the line connected, this is James Whitmore from corporate. Martin put the phone on speaker. I'm sitting with Dale Morrison. James continued. You know the name? There was a pause. Can't say I do, Todd replied. He's been your customer for 20 years. James said. For tractor purchases. Your general manager refused to sell him parts today. Refused to shake his hand. The silence on the phone changed. I wasn't aware, Todd said carefully. You are now, James replied. I want that hydraulic pump delivered to Dale's farm tomorrow morning. No charge. James. This is a warranty issue tied to a design defect, James said. And if it isn't handled, we'll be discussing your franchise agreement instead. Another pause. Understood, Todd said. James ended the call. That solves today's problem, he said. Now, let's talk about the bigger one. They talked for 2 hours. Dale explained his farm. 320 acres. Crop rotation. Minimal chemicals. Soil testing every year. Martin nodded constantly. This is exactly what the universities are preaching, Martin said. But big operations won't do it. Too slow. Too hands-on. James wrote notes. You're not obsolete, James said. You're early. Dale frowned. Early for what? For the future, everyone else will pretend they invented. James replied. James leaned back. I can't fix your bank situation overnight, he said. But I can make sure no dealer under our name treats you like that again. Dale stared at his coffee. Yesterday. Dale said, I was finished. James shook his head. No, he said. Yesterday. Someone forgot who actually builds this company. They stood up. This time when they shook hands, it meant something. Dale drove home as the sun dropped behind his fields. The land his grandfather cleared. The land his father worked. The land Rick Pohl's son had called obsolete. Tomorrow, the pump would arrive. What Dale didn't know yet was that Rick Polson's job would not survive the night. The hydraulic pump arrived at 7 a.m., not by a service tech, not by a delivery driver. Todd Henderson himself pulled into Dale's machine shed. The owner of the dealership stepped out of the truck slowly. His face looked tight, like someone who hadn't slept. Mr. Morrison, Todd said, I'm Todd Henderson. Dale wiped his hands on a rag. Didn't offer a handshake. Didn't refuse one either. I brought your pump, Todd said, and I came to apologize. He set the box on the workbench. What Rick said to you was unacceptable, Todd continued. It doesn't represent how I run my business. And it doesn't represent John Deere. Dale stayed quiet. I terminated Rick Pohl's son this morning, Todd said. That got Dale's attention. You fired your general manager. Dale said. I fired someone who damaged relationships I spent 30 years building, Todd replied. I've known you 20 years, Dale. You've always paid. Until the drought. Todd leaned against the bench. I suspended all your payments for 6 months, he said. gives you time to plant and recover. And the bank? Dale asked. I called them, Todd said. Told them I'd personally guarantee your account for 6 months. If you default, they come after me. Dale looked at him carefully. Why would you do that? Todd exhaled. Because James Whitmore explained something to me last night. Todd said, about brand reputation, about why dealerships exist. He paused. And because I was ashamed, Rick worked for me. His attitude came from somewhere. The pump sat between them, $300 worth of metal that almost ended a 40-year farm. I can't undo what happened, Todd said, but I can make sure it never happens again. Dale nodded once. Bringing the pump yourself helps, Dale said. Todd smiled faintly. There's more, he said. Corporate wants to feature your farm. Sustainable practices. Real-world data. They'll compensate you. Dale thought of Rick's words. Obsolete. I'll think about it, Dale said. That's fair, Todd replied. Todd left. Dale installed the pump. 3 hours later, the 4,430 roared back to life. That afternoon, the phone rang again. Dale, James Whitmore said, I've been busy. The bank wiped late fees, restructured the loan, lower interest. The university wanted field visits. The extension office wanted him speaking. Dale sat down hard on a bucket. Yesterday. Dale said, I was being shut down. Yesterday. James replied, you were invisible. Silence. Today. James continued, people are paying attention. Dale walked out to his fields as the sun set. The tractor stood ready. The soil waited. Rick Polson had called him obsolete. The land didn't agree, and neither did the future. Dale planted corn for 3 straight days. No breaks. No mistakes. The repaired 4430 ran smooth, like it had been waiting for a second chance. Every row he planted felt heavier than usual, not because of the soil, because of what almost didn't happen. One refused handshake, one bad attitude, and 40 years of work was nearly erased. By mid-July, the crop looked different, healthier, darker green, even growth. Neighbors noticed. They slowed their trucks along the road. Looked twice. Some stopped. Your corn looks damn good this year, one of them said. Same land, Dale replied. Same farmer. In August, the university showed up. 20 students. Clipboards. Clean boots that wouldn't stay clean for long. Dale stood in front of them in the machine shed. I'm not here to motivate you, he said. I'm here to show you what works. They walked the fields. He showed them soil tests from the last 10 years. You don't farm crops, Dale said. You farm soil. Crops are just a reward. One student asked, why don't bigger farms do this? Dale didn't hesitate. Because this takes time, he said, and attention. You can't manage land like this from an office. That line stayed with them. In October, Dale harvested. Best yield in 5 years. Enough to catch up. Enough to breathe again. Enough to know Rick Polson was wrong. 2 weeks later, Dale's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Morrison. A voice said, this is Rick Polson. Dale considered hanging up. He didn't. I wanted to apologize, Rick said, for how I treated you. Silence. I lost my job, Rick continued. Turns out word travels fast when you disrespect people. Dale looked out his fields. You didn't lose your job because of me, Dale said. You lost it because of who you were. Rick swallowed. You taught me something, Rick said, that someone's value doesn't disappear just because they're struggling. That lesson cost you, Dale replied. Learn it well. The call ended. Dale didn't feel victory. He felt closure, because respect doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from surviving them. And the handshake that never happened, it mattered less than what Dale did after he walked away. The story didn't end in Dale's fields. It spread. A short article appeared in a regional farming paper. Farmer refused service. Corporate stepped in. Then another. Then a longer one. Dale never called a journalist. Never pitched his story. People talked. About the dealer who forgot his roots. About the farmer who didn't beg. About the handshake that never happened. Invitations came next. County Extension Office, State Agriculture Conference, even a closed-door meeting with Deere engineers. Dale almost said no to all of them. He wasn't a speaker. He wasn't an expert. He was just a farmer. But James Whitmore told him something that stuck. If you don't tell your story, James said, someone else will tell it wrong. So Dale went. He stood in rooms full of suits and charts and projections. And he said one simple thing every time. You don't lose relevance because you're small. You lose relevance when you stop paying attention. Engineers started asking questions. Real ones. Not about margins. About soil. About wear patterns. About why equipment failed in real fields but not in test labs. Dale showed them his notebooks. Handwritten. Oil-stained. 40 years of observations. One engineer flipped through a page and froze. This failure pattern, he said. We've been chasing this for a decade. Dale shrugged. Land teaches faster than meetings, he said. Meanwhile, Henderson John Deere changed. Todd Henderson removed credit-only quotas, retrained managers, rewrote service policies. Farmers noticed. Guys who hadn't stepped inside that dealership in years came back. Not because of discounts, because of respect. And Dale, he went back to farming. Still woke before sunrise. Still fixed what he could himself. Still rotated crops the slow way. Recognition didn't change the work. It just confirmed the value was always there. But the real test came the next year. Another dry season. Another bad forecast. A younger farmer stopped by Dale's place. 20-something. New boots. Worried eyes. They won't extend my credit, the kid said. Dealer says I should sell out. Dale listened. Then he said, sit down. Let's look at your soil. And in that moment, Dale realized something. The handshake that never happened didn't just save his farm. It positioned him to save others. Not with money, with knowledge, with attention, with the dignity Rick Pohl's son tried to take from him. But the story still wasn't finished. Because consequences don't end when crops are harvested. They echo, and the final echo was coming. 3 years after the handshake that never happened, Dale stood in the same dealership again. Same building, same polished floors, same glass offices. But everything else was different. The sign on the door now read, Farmer Advisory Meeting Private. Inside the conference room sat engineers, regional managers, dealership owners, and a few farmers handpicked from across the state. Not big operators. Not corporate favorites. People like Dale. Todd Henderson stood at the front of the room. I want to start by saying this. Todd said, we didn't lose customers because of pricing. We lost them because we stopped listening. No slides. No charts. Just silence. Then Todd looked directly at Dale. This meeting exists because 3 years ago, a farmer walked out of this dealership without shaking a hand. Every eye in the room turned to Dale. He didn't smile, didn't nod. He just sat there. I thought that moment was small, Todd continued. One bad interaction, one bad manager, but it exposed something bigger. He paused. We forgot who the equipment is for. An engineer raised his hand. Mr. Morrison, he said, if you could change one thing about how companies like ours work with farmers, what would it be? Dale thought for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, carefully. Stop measuring farmers by what they owe, he said, and start measuring them by what they know. The room went quiet. Debt hides experience. Dale continued, and struggle doesn't erase value. Some of the smartest farmers I know are one bad season away from losing everything. Rick Polson's words echoed in Dale's mind. Small farms are obsolete. Dale looked around the room. My farm is still 320 acres, he said. I didn't expand, didn't chase scale, didn't become efficient on paper. He leaned forward slightly. But my soil is healthier now than it was 20 years ago. My yields are stable. My costs are low. And my farm will still be here when trends change again. That was the moment things shifted. Not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. Deere launched a farmer feedback program 6 months later. Dealers were evaluated on relationships, not just revenue. Service managers were required to spend days in the field, not just offices. And Rick Pohl's son? No one mentioned his name again. He became what he feared Dale already was: irrelevant. Dale never chased the spotlight. He kept farming, kept teaching, kept helping younger farmers quietly. Sometimes they asked him about the story, about the refused handshake. Dale always said the same thing. It wasn't about the handshake, he said. It was about knowing when not to beg for respect. He'd look out at his fields. At some point, you realize this, he'd add. The people who dismiss you today are often the ones who need you tomorrow. And somewhere in a corporate training manual, buried deep, is a case study titled, "The Handshake That Never Happened." Not about failure, about blindness, about what happens when you mistake struggle for weakness, and about a farmer who walked away with his dignity intact and changed an entire system by refusing to stay silent.